Howdy. Yeah, I'm back. Oh, yeah. Occasionally you may hear me go into my Texas accent. Even though I'm from California, I'm out in Texas quite a bit. And I assist some of their college and universities out there with threats to staff. And sometimes I'm teaching out there, so kind of bear with me from time to time. So it kind of slips in. Now, what we want to do is talk to you about two different segments today. We want to talk to you about statistics and where stalking is transpiring, etc., etc. And we also want to talk to you a little bit about what you need to do when you're first being stalked. But before we get into that, I'd like to show you something here. We're going to discuss several topics in regards to stalking. And when I usually lecture, most people have a copy of my latest book, which is Antidote for a Stalker. Now, this book will greatly help you if you're being stalked right now. It will also help you when we're going through all these segments during the transition in this particular web cycle. So, it will help you as a tool, and from time to time what I'll do is I'll refer back to the book. But the book has a great deal more of information than what we're going to cover on just one segment. So just keep that in mind. If you're actually being involved in a stalking scenario now, you probably should get a copy of the book because it'll help you through your particular trial and error. There's a chapter in there that discusses exactly what you need to do if you're being stalked and how to contact law enforcement, etc., etc. But we're going to cover those topics as well. But it may take us some time to get to those areas, and you may need that information right away. Now, the first thing we want to talk to you a little bit about is where stalking transpires. Well, it's a worldwide problem. It's just not a problem in the United States or the United Kingdom or France or Germany or Argentina or Peru or wherever. It's a problem every place that you have domestic violence or intimate partner relationships. Now, let's give you some statistics, and you can get a lot of these statistics from the National Center of Victims of Crime, which I sometimes assist as well in training, and their Stalking Resource Center. They do an outstanding job, and I would recommend that you just type in Stalking Resource Center on your computer and you can find statistics. You can also find information about your particular state's stalking legislation. Now, let's give you an example. 7.5 million people are stalked annually in the United States. About 75% of those are women and about 25% men. Also, I want to tell you that stalking is an equal opportunity crime. We get men stalking men, we get women stalking women, and it's not just from the LBGT or anything like that. That does transpire, but we do have different types of stalkers. Sometimes a revenge stalker will go after an individual, and we'll talk about revenge stalking later on in one of these segments. So you have to be aware that it is a worldwide problem as well as it's an equal opportunity environment. We do arrest women for stalking, but we arrest a lot more men for stalking than women. So therefore, when we talk about a stalker, in regards to gender, we will talk about male as being the stalker. Now, just give you another example, the United Kingdom has about 1,122,000 people stalked annually in their country. Now, that's a lot of people considering they don't have the same population figures as the United States. So just keep that in mind. Now, I get contacts from countries all over the world in regards to stalkers, and oftentimes there is a cultural disconnect that I'm running into more and more often from certain countries that teach, or not teach, but do not handle stalking the way they should. I'll give you an example. Countries that treat women as second-class citizens, it becomes extremely difficult for me to try and assist them with their issue on stalking. They go on my website, they read my books, They try and get information that way, but I can't get their law enforcement up to speed, so it's really difficult for those people, and I feel bad for them because it's a cultural issue that we're trying to overcome. Now, the next topic I want to talk about is, now that we understand that stalking is a huge problem in every place, it's not handled anywhere near as well as it should be, is contacting law enforcement when you are being stalked. And the first thing we tell you to do is contact law enforcement. Now, keep in mind that all law enforcement may not handle stalking the way you would like to have it handled, not because they don't want to handle it the way you'd like to have it handled, but because they're not well trained. Cops want to help you, but if they're not well trained in stalking or any other issue that they're handling, it may be more difficult, and we hear this all the time. Keep in mind that only 5 to 16% in the United States, 5 to 16% of all stalking is handled as a stalking crime and prosecuted. That's terrible, but it's also the same thing throughout the rest of the world. Stalking is not handled the way it should be, and that's one of the reasons why we teach on a regular basis. Now, when you contact law enforcement, we want you to be prepared. In other words, we want you to have all your ducks in a row, so to speak. And so we want you to have all the information that you can available for the officer that is contacting you in regards to the stalking. Oftentimes I'd get a stalking case and the woman would have several crime reports from several different jurisdictions that didn't handle the stalking the way it should have been handled, or just handled it as like a rude or annoying or threatening phone call, or a vandalism, or a trespass. You have to be able to put all those crimes together into a stalking charge, and oftentimes it doesn't occur that way. So when you're contacted by a patrol officer or deputy, what we want you to do is if you do not get the satisfaction that you thought you should from that individual, we want you to maybe move up a rank. In other words, contact a detective within that police department that may in fact be trained in domestic violence at the very least, and perhaps stalking as well, and present your case to them. Oftentimes that'll get you in the door. You're not trying to get the officer that made contact with you in trouble. You just have to understand or recognize that they may not be well trained in the field that you're trying to get them to, in the crime you're trying to get them to do. So, we unfortunately have to tell you that when you are a victim of stalking, oftentimes you have to be your own victim advocate. And that's unfortunate, but it's the truth. So like I said, you have to get all your paperwork ready. Anything the stalker's left with you, you have to be able to give that information to the officer, the detective that's handling your case. In other words, you have to document. And if you don't, it's going to be a very slow process. And by the way, if an officer comes up to you, which we oftentimes hear, they say, well, you need to get a restraining order. Well, that's really easier said than done, and there are times that we don't want an individual to get a restraining order because it may exacerbate the stalking scenario. And we'll discuss that in the next segment on how we investigate stalking, so you have a better idea of how law enforcement should actually approach a stalking scenario. So in other words, if an officer tells you go get a restraining order, well, that might be a good idea, but remember that a restraining order is only as good as the individual standing behind the order is. Someone that's going to initiate the order if the individual violates the order, and the vast majority of stalkers do violate restraining orders. So if you are thinking about getting a restraining order, make sure that you contact a domestic violence advocate within the court system or even in your community that might be able to walk you through the process. We're going to talk about that in the next segment. And when I worked for the Family Protection Unit within our police department, we developed a unit, a specialized unit, and we'll discuss that in the next segment. We walked people through the process of getting a restraining order. So what we want you to remember in this segment is two things. Stalking is a worldwide problem. It's huge, and it doesn't get investigated like it should. And if you are being stalked, we want you to contact your local law enforcement professional. And if you don't get the response you thought you should, you need to move up and see if you can contact either a supervisor or a detective that handles stalking so that you can get your case in motion. All right? We good? Great.